The air inside the penthouse was still too heavy to breathe. Daphne stood near the grand window, the one that overlooked all of Midtown Manhattan. One hand cradling her belly, the other gripping the edge of a nearby chair. No one moved. The nurse, once bustling with soft encouragements and tiny folded towels, had faded into the background like wallpaper. Hello, my wonderful family. Welcome once again to Love and Twilight with Dr. Phillips. Every story here is more than just a tale. It's a reflection of love, pain, hope, and healing. Before we dive in, let me know you're present by commenting, "I'm with you, Dr. Phillips." Hit that like button if your heart is open to today's journey, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that touches the soul. Aiden Zachary stood by the fireplace, the very place he had once knelt, to kiss her bump and whisper names they might call the twins. Now, he tightened his navy tie like he was dressing for someone else's life. "You're serious," Daphne said, more to herself than to him. "I've made my decision," Aiden answered. His tone was sterile, void of apology. The glass of water on the table trembled as another mild contraction passed through her. She didn't flinch. Not this time. Pain would not be the loudest thing in the room. Pride would. Simone was already pacing like the lady of the house. She touched the walls. She gave the driver a nod. She even examined her nails like this was a spa appointment. "You waited until today," Daphne said, voice low but lethal. "You waited until I was at my most vulnerable. Just like a coward." "Don't turn this into an attack," Aiden muttered, refusing to meet her eyes. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. "You kissed me last night," she said. "You kissed my stomach. You said you were excited." Aiden looked at her now, briefly, and that one flicker of guilt betrayed more than any defense he could have voiced. "It doesn't change the fact that Simone and I are moving forward," he said, his voice sharpening. Daphne's lips curled, not into a smile, but something close to disgust. "You mean the woman you were sleeping with while I was in prenatal surgery?" Simone scoffed. "Oh, please. That was nothing. You were boring him to death with your vitamins and pregnancy books." Daphne turned toward her with a calm so cold it burned. "Speak again," she said, "and I'll forget I ever taught myself grace." Simone stepped back, just slightly. The nurse whispered, "Ma'am, I think we need to head to the hospital soon." But Daphne ignored her. "You think your silence buys you a clean exit, Aiden?" she asked. "You think I'm going to weep and beg and let you toss me away like a deal that went stale?" "I think you should rest," he said. "This stress can't be good for the babies." "Oh," she laughed bitterly. "Now you care." Her body tensed again, this time sharper. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her maternity gown, but her face didn't change. "You're cruel," she said, "but not clever. You thought timing this when I was too weak to fight back would protect you. But I don't need to fight to win, Aiden. I just need to remember silence again. The kind of silence that builds cathedrals of rage." "You'll be taken care of," Aiden offered. "There's no need to complicate this." Her eyes lit up, not with joy, but fire. "You don't get to decide what's complicated," she said. "You think your money matters to me? You think after I carried your children inside me I need your legal leftovers to survive?" Simone walked over, placing a possessive hand on Aiden's chest. "She's not thinking straight. It's the hormones." Daphne smiled. Then a sharp pain hit, sudden and violent, like a knife drawn from her spine through her belly. She gasped and dropped to one knee. "Daphne," the nurse shouted, rushing to her. Aiden didn't move. Simone barely looked. Her water broke again, this time visibly, unmistakably. The liquid hit the marble floor in a wide splash. It looked like defeat, but Daphne's eyes said otherwise. "Get out," she growled through clenched teeth. "Let us at least help you to the car." Aiden started. "Get out," she screamed, and this time it wasn't just pain, it was war. The nurse didn't wait. She called down to the driver, "Bring the wheelchair now." Simone and Aiden backed toward the door, but not before Aiden said quietly, "You'll regret doing this alone." Daphne looked up, drenched in pain, fire in her throat, voice trembling but unbroken. "You mistook being alone for being powerless. That was your last mistake." 10 minutes later, the SUV sped down Fifth Avenue, sirens clearing the road ahead. Inside, Daphne gripped the nurse's hand. "She'll meet us there," the nurse whispered. "We're almost there." Daphne said nothing. She stared straight ahead, sweat beading her forehead, her gown soaked in pain and water, but her gaze was sharp. She wasn't broken. She was delivering, and she wouldn't be the only one reborn in that hospital. The hospital walls didn't soothe her. Not the sterile white, not the polished chrome, not the distant sound of soft jazz playing from someone's tablet. Nothing dulled the edge of what Daphne was about to face, not just labor but transformation. The nurse beside her moved swiftly, adjusting monitors, checking vitals, whispering reassurances that barely registered. Daphne lay on the bed, one hand gripping the metal railing, the other clutching her own thigh as if grounding herself into the moment. Her back arched as another contraction tore through her spine. 7 centimeters, the doctor called. She felt every centimeter like a betrayal, each one announcing her body's readiness, though her heart wasn't. But it had to be, because weakness wouldn't deliver her sons. Pain curled through her belly again, more intense this time. It dragged a moan from her throat, but not a cry for help. It was a war cry. The nurse wiped sweat from Daphne's brow. "You're doing incredible. You're almost there." Daphne barely heard her. Her mind had drifted to memories sharpened by rage. 3 months ago, Aiden had booked a cabin for the weekend. A quiet retreat in Vermont. Snow, silence, and a roaring fire. They'd talked about names. He kissed her bump and made her peppermint tea, promised her the world with lazy smiles and forehead kisses. "Whatever happens," he'd said, "we'll be solid." Back then, she believed that love was a promise. Now she understood it was a gamble, and she had lost the bet. 8 centimeters, came the next voice. The nurse, calm, warm, relentless. But the pain, it was volcanic. Her knuckles went white around the railing. She bit down a scream, refusing to let agony be louder than her will. She wouldn't scream for him. She wouldn't scream for the man who walked away from her moments before her world changed. She'd scream for her sons. Only for them. "Would you like to hold the photo again?" the nurse asked, holding up a small print. A sonogram. Tennyson and Thatcher curled together like commas inside her. She nodded weakly. The nurse placed it in her palm. Her thumb brushed over the image, and something shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it took on purpose. Her breathing deepened. Slower, more deliberate. She was going to bring them into the world. Without apology, without permission, without a man beside her pretending to be brave while hiding behind a mistress. The hours blurred. 9 centimeters. Breathing harder. 9.5. Shaking. 10. Screaming. The doctor entered, gloves snapping. Nurses positioned themselves. "Daphne, you're ready," someone said. She already knew. She had been ready the moment Aiden walked away. Push. She did. Her body arched, her hands gripped, her voice tore. Push. Her hips lifted, her ribs ached, her throat burned. Push. The room spun. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her heart felt like it would explode. And then, a cry. Sharp, loud, powerful. A boy. "Tennyson," she whispered. "That's your name, baby. That's your name." They placed him on her chest for a second, just enough for his heartbeat to meet hers. And then, another wave. The doctor glanced up. "One more, Daphne." She didn't nod. She roared. The room shook with the sound of her effort. Then silence. Then another cry. Softer this time, but deep. Strong. "Thatcher," she breathed. "You made it too. Both boys. Whole. Alive. Perfect." Daphne stared at them. Her chest heaved, her skin gleamed, and yet all she could see was the truth of her victory. Not survival. Ascension. She had brought kings into the world with her bare hands and no one to hold her through the storm. No man. No ring. No regret. Just love. Raw and pure and eternal. The nurse handed her Tennyson first. He squirmed, already protesting. His little fists tight, his mouth ready to argue with the world. A leader. Then Thatcher. Quieter. More observant. His fingers brushed her collarbone like he was reading the story etched into her skin. A thinker. "Your father left us today," she whispered to them both, holding their warmth against her heartbeat. "But you gave me something better than love. You gave me purpose." 3 days had passed. 3 days of hushed footsteps, midnight feedings, and silence broken only by newborn cries and soft lullabies hummed from a mother whose world had split open, only to be rebuilt in her arms. Daphne sat upright in the recovery suite, a silk robe draped over her shoulders, her hair loose around her face. Her sons lay in bassinets beside her, Tennyson on the left, Thatcher on the right. A nurse had offered to take them to the nursery for a few hours of rest. She'd declined. She didn't want rest. She wanted memory. She wanted to remember the moment she stopped needing anyone but the boys she'd created. The city outside buzzed with scandal. Inside this room, Legacy was being drafted. Her lawyer arrived just before sunrise. He was early 50s, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed. Martin Klein. Trusted, loyal, ruthless when needed. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I want the clause activated." He blinked once, then again. "You're sure?" "I'm not even tired," she said flatly, pouring herself a cup of tea. "And even if I were, I'd still want him served at brunch." Martin pulled out his tablet and opened the file. "If we invoke the prenatal investment equity agreement, the twins are legally entitled to 25% each of Zachary worldwide, not just future dividends." "Equity, at birth." "Which is now," she said, eyes flicking to the clock. He looked at the bassinet. "Most mothers wait until the umbilical cord heals before they launch corporate warfare." "I'm not most mothers," she replied. "And this isn't warfare, this is justice." Elsewhere, in a glass rooftop restaurant uptown, white roses hung from gold-trimmed chandeliers. Champagne flutes clinked. Photographers lined the entrance. Simone Lefebvre, draped in white silk, posed with practiced elegance, her hand always resting just right on Aiden's chest. Aiden looked distracted. He wasn't used to distraction, but then again, he wasn't used to being cornered either. His assistant approached mid-toast, pale and sweating. "Sir, legal documents were just delivered. They're time-sensitive." Aiden grabbed the envelope with irritation. Simone leaned closer, whispering, "Ignore it. Today's supposed to be about us." But he'd already torn the seal. And there it was, a twin-stamped agreement. Filed, signed, and time-locked. Legal, bulletproof, Daphne's signature in bold black ink. The prenatal investment equity clause, activated. Effective immediately, the Zachary twins, Tennyson and Thatcher, each own 25% of Zachary worldwide capital. Total, 50%. Silence fell over the table as Aiden's lawyer reviewed the document. "It's ironclad," the man muttered. Simone's face blanched. "What does that mean?" "It means," Aiden said slowly, "my children now own half of everything I built." Back at the hospital, Daphne leaned back in her chair, her laptop open, her fingers dancing across the trackpad. A design file was open, one with gold-lettered branding that read, "Tennyson and Thatcher Holdings, LLC." The logo was regal, sharp serif font, two crowns intertwined. Bold, legacy-driven. She wasn't just building a company, she was laying a throne. Headlines spread within hours. "Breaking Zachary twins born with 50% stake in father's empire business." Shocker, prenatal clause stuns Zachary capital queen mother clause. Legal experts break down the legal coup brunch ruined. Simone Lefebvre leaves engagement. Party in tears. Daphne sipped her tea slowly as the news anchor read it aloud on TV. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned the volume down and looked at her sons. "You've got the world's attention now," she whispered. "Don't waste it." Her phone vibrated. A message from her former driver, now a freelance photographer on the side. Photo attached, Aiden standing by his luxury car, staring at the legal notice. Simone storming off in the background, confetti still falling from the sky. Daphne saved the photo, not for revenge, for documentation. The day her boys became more than heirs, they became names that mattered in boardrooms. "Miss Vaughn," the nurse peeked in, "would you like help getting up?" She nodded, moved slowly, stood upright with deliberate grace. She adjusted her robe, smoothed her hair, picked up Thatcher in one arm, Tennyson in the other. She didn't shake. She didn't wobble. She walked to the window, both sons in her arms, and stared out at the skyline. This city would learn to spell their names, not because of who their father was, but because of who their mother had become. The next morning, a black car with no license plate pulled into the Zachary Worldwide Capital underground parking deck. 3 lawyers stepped out. They wore nothing flashy, just dark suits, black briefcases, and the kind of confidence that made security guards step aside without being asked. By 8:59 a.m., they had passed 2 security checks and were waiting in the executive lobby. At exactly 9 a.m., the receptionist pressed the intercom button. "Mr. Zachary," she said carefully, "your presence is requested in conference room 12. Legal counsel is here." Aiden, in his usual pinstripe suit and custom cufflinks, set down his glass of green juice. He didn't respond immediately. He knew what it was about, and he knew who sent them. Daphne, meanwhile, was standing before a whiteboard, her robe replaced with a silk blouse, high-waisted pants, and the same diamond earrings she wore the night she signed the prenatal investment equity agreement. The makeshift home office she'd set up in her hospital suite had grown into a war room. Laptop open, Zoom links lined up, press inquiries queued. Beside her, Martin adjusted his glasses. "Your ex-husband is about to be steamrolled." She looked down at the bundle in her arms. Thatcher, half asleep, fingers curled around her necklace. "Correction," she said. "My sons are about to claim what's already theirs." Inside conference room 12, Aiden stared at the legal brief in front of him. The Zachary Board of Trustees had convened a special session. The glass table felt like ice beneath his palms. One of the lawyers, a woman named Cheryl Wynn, began the presentation, pursuant to Section 8 of the Prenatal Investment Equity Agreement, executed on March 7th of this year, and in compliance with federal filings submitted post-labor. She placed a document on the table, turned toward the projector, and clicked to slide 1. Effective immediately, Tennyson Zachary and Thatcher Zachary each hold 25% voting share in Zachary Worldwide Capital. She continued, "This entitles both minor beneficiaries via maternal proxy, Ms. Daphne Vaughn, to full access, oversight, and strategic participation in board-level decisions, pending formal representation in fiduciary matters." Aiden's fingers twitched. "You knew this was possible," said one trustee. "She waited," said another. "She waited until the day you tried to replace her." Simone sat silently at the far end of the table, her legs crossed, sunglasses hiding half her face. She hadn't spoken since the documents were served. Her diamond ring glinted under the boardroom lights, still oversized but meaningless now. "Can she do this?" Aiden asked sharply. Cheryl didn't blink. She already did. Back in the hospital suite, Daphne nursed Tennyson with one arm while scrolling through the media reactions with the other. CNBC, Zachary Board in disarray after legal shakeup. Forbes, how one mother legally outplayed a billion-dollar CEO. The Cut, power has a new face and it's holding twins. Simone stormed into Aiden's private office later that afternoon, slamming the door behind her. "This was supposed to be ours." Aiden didn't respond. He sat behind his desk, staring at the signed clause that had changed everything. "She tricked you," Simone hissed. "No," he muttered. "She protected herself. I just didn't think she'd pull the trigger. You said she was fragile, emotional, that she'd walk away quietly." Aiden stood now, voice colder. "And I was wrong." Simone narrowed her eyes. "So what, you admire her now?" "I underestimated her," he said. "That won't happen again." Simone stepped back, suddenly uneasy. "So, what happens to us?" He looked at her, eyes sharp. "That depends," he said. "Are you the kind of woman who plays checkers while a queen plays chess?" Simone didn't answer, and for the first time since their engagement, she realized she wasn't just losing Aiden's attention, she was losing his respect. Meanwhile, Daphne opened a new bank account under T&T Holdings. She wired a private deposit, 7 figures, not because she needed to, because she could, and because in a world where men like Aiden spoke in wealth and power, she was fluent now in both. Later that evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker, still feeding Thatcher, who was dozing peacefully now. Aiden's voice. "I want to meet." Daphne didn't flinch. "Why?" "To talk. You've said enough. Daphne, this doesn't have to be hostile." She gave a soft laugh. "It's not hostile, Aiden. It's strategic. The same way your departure was silence. Then you win." She paused. "No, Aiden," she replied calmly. "My sons win. I'm just making sure the world knows their name before they can even spell it. They weren't just babies anymore. They were headlines. Every morning, the news found new ways to say the same thing. Daphne Vaughn had rewritten the rulebook. The public couldn't get enough of it. Boardroom blogs analyzed her contract moves like championship plays. Talk shows called her the mother who outmaneuvered a billionaire. And fashion magazines praised her postpartum poise as if business acumen could be stitched into her silk blouse. But Daphne didn't care about being trendy. She cared about being remembered. And this This was legacy in motion. The nursery was warm and sunlit. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto the city. The twins were laid on a plush custom mat, each swaddled in navy blue with their names embroidered in white thread. Tennyson fussed. Thatcher blinked slowly, watching ceiling light dance across crystal mobiles. A knock came. Martin entered with a silver tray, coffee, documents, and a velvet box. Daphne adjusted her blouse, wiped milk from her shoulder, and took a seat by the window. "What's the velvet for?" she asked. Martin smiled. "A gift from the board, or rather, from one faction of it." She opened the box. Inside, 2 baby-sized cufflinks. "Platinum, engraved with T&T. No pressure," he said. "But half the financial sector's waiting to see what your sons will wear at their first shareholder portrait." Daphne gave a quiet chuckle. "They'll be in onesies, Martin." He cleared his throat. "Then we'll need bespoke onesies." Meanwhile, Aiden canceled his week's appointments. He blamed fatigue. Then stress. Then PR fallout. But the truth was simpler. He didn't know how to navigate a world where he wasn't the final authority, where rooms didn't silence themselves when he walked in, where his ex-fiancée was more concerned with her next Instagram brand deal than the empire he was trying to stabilize. And worst of all, he didn't know what to do with the empty space Daphne used to occupy. Simone, on the other hand, had found her escape. She was spotted exiting a luxury spa, shielding her face with a Balenciaga scarf. Reporters surrounded her with questions. "Did you know about the twins' equity? Was your engagement a smokescreen? Is it true Aiden's changing the prenup already?" She didn't answer. But the camera didn't lie. Tears behind her sunglasses, hair pulled into a messy bun, nails chipped, a diamond ring still on, but clearly too heavy now. At T&T Holdings' soft launch event, Daphne stood under a crystal chandelier in a custom, white pantsuit, holding one twin while the other napped in a stroller beside her. Investors didn't just show up. They lined up. "Your pitch deck was perfect," one of them said. "But your vision? That's what sold us." She shook hands, smiled for photos, but kept one hand on her son at all times. "This isn't just a business," she told a young female intern. "It's a statement." Across the city, Aiden was watching it all. From his penthouse, on silent, over and over, Daphne speaking into microphones, laughing with founders, holding both of their sons like metals forged in fire. He gripped the remote until his knuckles turned white. Then his phone rang. Simone. He let it ring, and ring, and ring, then turned off the phone, because deep down he knew he had traded a woman of substance for one made of sparkle. Daphne sat on the nursery floor later that evening, barefoot, robe draped open slightly, hair in a loose braid. Tennyson grunted beside her, half asleep. Thatcher sucked on his fist. She looked at both of them, then whispered softly, "You were born in chaos, but you'll rise in clarity." She reached for her journal and wrote just one sentence. "Legacy isn't built on revenge, it's built on refusal to break." 3 months later, the world had stopped calling it a scandal. Now it was a case study. Professors taught it. Startups referenced it. Corporate titans whispered about it in elevators. And Daphne? She was simply executing her blueprint. The first time she walked back into a Zachary Worldwide building, the air shifted. Not a gasp, not a confrontation, just that charged stillness, the kind people feel when history walks into a room. She wore navy. Tailored, not tight, not seductive, strategic. Clean lines, soft gold accents, a mother's power disguised as executive elegance. Reporters snapped photos from outside the glass. Security opened the doors before she even reached the entrance. Inside the lobby, employees froze mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-breath. Daphne walked past the welcome desk without needing an introduction. She held nothing in her hands, not a bag, not a file, just presence. In the boardroom, the quarterly shareholders meeting had just begun. Aiden was seated at the head of the table, posture stiff, jaw clenched. He was halfway through his opening remarks when the door opened. She didn't knock, didn't ask. She just entered. "Ms. Vaughn," one of the secretaries said, startled. "I'm here in proxy for Tennyson and Thatcher Zachary," she replied, calmly, "who jointly control 50% of the company's shares." Aiden stood slowly. "You're not supposed to be here." She turned her gaze toward him, measured, unshaken. I represent half your empire now. You should be grateful I came." The boardroom went silent. She walked to the vacant seat beside the general counsel and sat. The chair didn't creak. The men didn't breathe. And Aiden? He swallowed something invisible. She opened her folder. "Let's continue." Over the next hour, she dismantled 3 proposals, challenged 2 budget allocations, and recommended a shift in the company's emerging markets portfolio. Every point came with a citation, every recommendation backed by research. When a junior executive tried to talk over her, she waited, let him finish, then looked him dead in the eye. Interrupting isn't leadership, it's panic in disguise. He didn't speak again. Aiden leaned over during a recess. Voice low, tense. "You planned this," he hissed. She didn't look at him, just flipped through her notes. "I trusted you," she replied. "But once you showed me who you really were, I stopped wasting time on heartbreak and started building." "You're enjoying this?" "No," she said, still not looking up. "I'm documenting it." Later that week, Daphne appeared on a podcast titled Boardroom Rebirth. The host leaned in, eager. "What do you say to those who claim you're using your children to wage a war against your ex?" She smiled, unfazed. "I didn't weaponize my sons," she said. "I protected their future." Was it revenge? No. Revenge is a response. This was a strategy, and it's working. Meanwhile, Tennyson was learning to sit upright without falling. Thatcher had discovered he liked Bach more than lullabies. And the nanny, handpicked, vetted, and trained, documented their milestones in a leather-bound journal for Daphne. Each page began with the same quote in her handwriting. "May you grow into men who never shrink to make others comfortable." In a private corner office, Aiden reviewed a financial report. For the first time since he founded the company, his signature wasn't enough. Every move now required counter-signature from Daphne, or her legal proxy on behalf of the twins. His name was still on the building, but her initials were in every decision. The empire wasn't just motion, it was evolution, and she wasn't just part of it, she was driving it. There's a certain kind of silence that happens when a woman walks into a space they thought she'd never return to. Not the hush of fear, not the pause of shock, but the recognition of power. Daphne didn't walk into Zachary Worldwide Capital like she was back. She walked in like she never left. Her driver opened the door. She stepped out in a dark green suit, sharp-collared cinched waist, soft silk blouse beneath. No flashy jewelry, no heavy makeup, just presence. 2 guards at the entrance nodded. Not because protocol demanded it, but because instinct told them to. She passed through the revolving doors like glass had never once been closed to her. Inside, a wave of whispers trailed her wake. "She's here. I thought she was on maternity leave. Did she just walk straight into the executive wing?" Yes, she did. The boardroom was already in session. 12 men, 2 women, 1 long glass table, financial charts lighting up the digital display. Aiden sat at the head. He stopped mid-sentence when the door opened. Daphne stepped inside without asking. The silence was electric. She took the seat directly across from him and placed a slim leather folio on the table. "I assume my seat is still valid," she said. Aiden leaned back. "You're early." "I'm effective," she replied. One of the board members coughed to mask a smile. The chairman, an older man with silver eyebrows and a reputation for cautious neutrality, cleared his throat. "Miss Vaughn, it's unexpected. I represent Tennyson and Thatcher's interest," she said smoothly. 50% equity means 50% participation, especially when decisions involve corporate direction. We weren't expecting you today, which is exactly why I came. The first motion on the agenda, the restructuring of Zachary Worldwide's digital branch. Aiden pushed for layoffs and an international shift. Daphne flipped open her folio. "I've analyzed your projections," she said. "Your plan cuts costs by 12%, while gutting innovation by 43%. Short-term survival," Aiden replied, "leads to long-term success, unless it builds resentment and reduces brand trust," she said without flinching. A silence fell again. A younger executive cleared his throat. "Miss Vaughn, do you have an alternative?" She tapped her finger on the table once. Deliberate, then slid a document forward. "My proposal, same cost savings, but we scale using freelance tech partners instead of full disbandment. We protect core teams and keep morale." One of the women on the board skimmed it. "This actually makes more sense." Aiden's jaw tightened. Daphne leaned back slightly, not gloating, just present, just unshaken. During the break, Aiden found her by the espresso machine. "You're making waves." "No," she said, pouring a cup of black coffee. "I'm correcting your imbalance. You really think this is sustainable? I think I gave birth without you, and built an operational portfolio while healing from a C-section. So yes, sustainable is the least of what I'm capable of." He looked at her, that old flicker of admiration rising again. But she didn't look back. Later, in the second half of the meeting, Daphne introduced a motion to establish Zachary Future Leaders, a scholarship program in the names of her sons. For legacy, she said simply, not ego. The board voted. Yes. One abstained, Aiden. But even he didn't vote no. Outside the building, cameras snapped furiously as Daphne exited the glass doors. A reporter called out, "Miss Vaughn, what's it feel like returning to a company your ex once let alone?" She paused, then answered without turning. "I'm not returning," she said. "I'm repositioning." And with that, she got into the back seat of the car. They called it a meeting, but what unfolded that afternoon in conference room, Delta felt more like a reckoning. The quarterly review had barely begun when Daphne flipped to the last page of her presentation deck. "I'd like to propose a revision of the internal reporting structure," she said, calm as ever. Aiden, seated directly across from her, kept his hands folded, but his knuckles told another story. White, tight, braced, Daphne continued, unbothered. "For too long, the flow of information here has been vertical, everything passing through one gatekeeper, one filter, one voice. That stops today." A senior VP shifted in his seat. The head of PR frowned. Aiden narrowed his eyes. "You want to dismantle the hierarchy?" "No," she said, turning another page. "I want to modernize it." She clicked the remote. A diagram flashed on the screen. Streamlined departments, decentralized communication, shared oversight. If we're going to protect shareholder value, we can't keep playing emperor with a crown made of paperwork. We need collaboration, visibility, accountability, silence. Then a voice from the back. "What about your own oversight?" She didn't blink. "Hold me accountable. I have no problem being audited. Can the same be said for the rest of this table?" A few looked down. One smirked and leaned back. But no one challenged her again. By the end of the first hour, 3 budget reallocations had been approved. By the second, an entire department merger was paused, pending review from Daphne's task team. By the third, Aiden's influence had shifted from absolute to reactive. He tried to push back once. "Do you even understand the complexity of these deals?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I gave birth to 2 human beings and closed a funding round from a hospital bed. I don't just understand complexity, I live it." After the meeting, Aiden cornered her in the hallway. "You're making this personal." "No," she said. "I'm making this professional. You're the one who thought I'd fold just because you left before the twins could cry. You're rewriting everything I built." She stepped closer. "I'm not rewriting your empire, Aiden. I'm correcting the narrative." Then, just for a moment, her voice softened, barely. "I loved you once, and I still gave you the benefit of the doubt, but you used me as a placeholder while planning your next move. You thought motherhood would weaken me." He didn't speak. Couldn't. "Turns out," she added, "it made me sharper." That evening, her sons were napping when she arrived home. She stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching them, Tennyson with one arm, stretched like a conqueror, Thatcher curled into his blanket, peaceful. She whispered, "Today, I reshaped the table your last name sits on." At a nearby bar, Aiden sat alone in the private lounge once reserved for victory celebrations. Now, it was just glass, and noise, and silence. He stared at a bottle of bourbon he hadn't touched. His phone buzzed, Simone again. He didn't answer. He scrolled instead to an internal memo. Subject, implementation of Vaughn restructure proposal, effective immediately. He leaned back, eyes closing. He hadn't just lost control of the company. He'd lost the right to define what power looked like. Meanwhile, Daphne was drafting a new mission statement. One line echoed louder than the rest. "True leadership doesn't need a title. It leaves receipts." There are outfits that flatter, and there are outfits that declare war. The red dress Daphne wore to the executive lounge that night did both. Satin, deep crimson, backless, minimal jewelry. One slit running dangerously high. She didn't walk in like she was dressed to impress. She walked in like the room owed her silence. And it gave it. The lounge was dimly lit, brass sconces, jazz murmuring from hidden speakers, mahogany tables, and the occasional clink of glass against glass. Reserved for board members and VIP partners. No press. No outsiders. Aiden was already there, nursing a glass of scotch, sleeves rolled halfway up, tie loosened but not removed. He looked up the moment she entered, and didn't look away. Not once. Daphne took the far end of the bar, crossed her legs, ordered a dry martini. Her presence was too precise to be coincidence. Aiden stood and walked over. He didn't speak immediately, just stood beside her, watching her reflection in the backlit bottles of whiskey. "You look like a woman who bled while you kissed someone else?" She interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. He exhaled. "I deserve that." "You deserve more than that," she said, eyes never leaving the glass in front of her. "But I'm not here to hand out punishments, just memories." He took the stool beside her. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Same reason as you," she said. "I needed silence. I thought you'd hate me forever." "I did," she replied. "And now?" She turned to face him for the first time that night. "Now I pity you." That landed harder than an insult. She took a slow sip of her drink. Aiden watched her, visibly drawn in and visibly restrained. "You miss me," he said quietly. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at him with a soft kind of ache in her expression. Not longing, just recognition. "I miss the version of you that used to love me. The man who couldn't wait to hear the twins' heartbeat. The man who kissed my forehead at 3 a.m. because he couldn't sleep without knowing I was okay." He looked away. She kept going. "That man died the moment my water broke." The silence between them stretched, warm, uncomfortable, charged. And then she leaned in, pressed her lips to his. Not soft, not sensual, not forgiving. It was a kiss made of memory, of fire, of fury, of everything she would never allow again. And when she pulled back, breath shallow but voice steady, she said, "Don't confuse nostalgia with love, Aiden. You can't romance your way back into a throne you walked away from." She stood, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, adjusted her clutch, and walked toward the exit, heels clicking softly against the wood. He didn't follow. He couldn't. He had nothing left to offer that she hadn't already reclaimed for herself. In the car, Daphne inhaled deeply, not because she regretted the kiss, but because for the first time in a long time she finally understood what it meant to be free of someone. Aiden used to walk through his office like a man with the wind at his back. Now he moved slower, not because of age, not because of fatigue, but because something in him had started unraveling, and no one in his empire dared mention it, except his reflection. Every morning he stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than necessary. The tie took an extra loop. The cufflinks didn't snap right the first time. His cologne didn't smell like confidence anymore. It just masked the silence. He still signed off on deals, still led meetings, still spoke at conferences, but his focus wandered. Every slide reminded him of her. Every silence felt like the echo of her absence. And every strong woman who entered a room reminded him of the one who once sat beside him. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Daphne didn't vanish from his world. She moved through it like a headline that refused to fade. She spoke at women in finance events, holding Thatcher on her hip while Tennyson slept in the back row. She graced the cover of Visionary CEO Quarterly, not for what she'd survived, but for what she built. And every time someone mentioned her name in the Zachary boardroom, Aiden had to pretend his heart wasn't clenching like a fist under the table. He was surrounded by wealth, and yet starving. Sometimes he watched old security footage from before the split, her laughing in the office kitchen, barefoot with a coffee cup in hand, her whispering to the bump under her dress during elevator rides, her waiting for him in his office at 7 p.m., notebook in hand, eyes half dreaming. Now she walked the halls with purpose, and without him. He caught glimpses of her more often than he admitted, at charity galas, panel discussions, even his own company's shareholder mixers. And every time, she looked untouchable, not out of reach, just beyond consequence, like a queen who'd already buried her king. 6 months after the board restructuring, they both ended up at a corporate roundtable hosted at a private villa in the Hamptons. It wasn't a coincidence. It was strategy. Daphne arrived in an ivory blazer, holding hands with Tennyson, while Thatcher clung to her assistant's arm. Aiden approached at cocktail hour, drink in hand, shirt collar open. "You brought the heirs," he said dryly. "I bring them everywhere," she replied. "They're not accessories, they're my shareholders." He gave a humorless chuckle. "You always were good at redefining the narrative." She turned, fully facing him now. "And you were always good at hiding in one." They stood alone by the pool. The laughter of executives floated nearby. But between them was only air and memories. Aiden looked at her, truly looked, for the first time in months. "You're not angry anymore," he said. "No," she replied. "I outgrew it. So what are you now?" She held his gaze, steady and warm. Unattached, unbothered, unavailable. His voice dipped, vulnerable. "Do you miss me at all?" She didn't blink. "I miss the man who used to protect my name when I wasn't in the room. I miss the way you used to wake me up just to say, 'I love you.' But that man died the day he stood in front of me and handed me betrayal wrapped in entitlement." He looked down. She didn't. She stood taller. "I don't want revenge, Aiden. I just want peace. And I found it. In myself, in my boys, in the empire I built while you tried to erase me." That night, Aiden returned to the city alone. He opened the drawer in his penthouse bedroom and pulled out the photo album he once kept in the nightstand. First ultrasound, her baby shower smile, his hand on her belly, pressed like a promise. He closed it, not because it hurt, but because he knew now. Love didn't die when Daphne walked away. It died the moment he expected her to stay. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Aiden Zachary, who once made nations bend at the negotiation table, was standing at the gates of a townhouse in Tribeca, holding a teddy bear with no card and no clue what to say. He didn't knock immediately. He stared at the intercom like it might speak for him. Then finally, he pressed the button. Upstairs, Daphne was breastfeeding Thatcher while Tennyson giggled wildly from the living room rug, trying to pull a throw pillow apart. Her assistant opened the front door. "Mr. Zachary," the woman said carefully. "She's busy. I'll wait," Aiden replied, adjusting his sleeves. "No suit today?" Daphne said from the staircase, eyes cold but curious. "Must be serious." He looked up at her. She was barefoot, hair up in a loose bun, silk robe tied at the waist, her power not muted, but effortless. "I want to talk," he said. She didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the nursery. And he followed. Inside the twins' room, pastel blue walls and soft lighting surrounded them. Daphne settled Thatcher in the crib, kissed his forehead, and then turned to face the man who once left her bleeding with no explanation. Aiden cleared his throat. "I want to see them." Daphne crossed her arms. "You had a chance to see them the moment they entered the world. I know I messed up." "Messed up?" she echoed. "You discarded us. You humiliated me in my final hour of pregnancy. And now you want access like we're a company you can reinvest in?" His jaw clenched. "I was scared." "No," she snapped. "You were selfish. You chose optics over honesty, a PR trophy over a woman who carried your legacy. I didn't know what I was losing." She laughed. Soft, bitter. "That's because you were never looking." Aiden stepped closer now, voice cracking. "I can't sleep. I see them in every corner of my penthouse. I hear their names in boardrooms. And every time someone praises what you're building, I feel like the smallest man in the room." Daphne didn't flinch. "You feel small because you acted small. I want to do better." "Not for me," she said quickly. "Those days are gone. But if you want a relationship with the boys, it won't be because you showed up at my door. It'll be because you earned it. Every minute, every visit, every ounce of their trust." He nodded slowly. "I'm willing." She looked at him, hard and long, before picking up a journal from the shelf. "Read this," she said, handing it over. "What is it?" "Their routines, their allergies, their first words, their schedules, their everything. Start by learning the details I carried alone for months." He took the book, eyes down. "You're not a father because you show up once. You're a father because you stay, day in, day out." 2 hours later, Aiden sat on the living room floor, cradling Tennyson in his lap while Thatcher clung to his mother. The boys didn't cry, but they didn't run into his arms either, and that hurt more than screaming. "They're watching," Daphne said gently, "and one day they'll ask what kind of man their father really was. I want to be someone they don't have to edit out of their story. Daphne nodded. Then start writing a new chapter. That night, Aiden left the townhouse in silence. No closure, no kiss, no magic solution, just a start. And that, for once, was enough. Love didn't knock. It didn't arrive in a tailored suit or with apologies carefully practiced in the mirror. It showed up quietly, wearing rolled-up sleeves, holding a burp cloth, asking questions instead of offering solutions. And his name was Caleb Knox. He wasn't flashy. A strategic investor with a track record of quiet wins and zero scandals, divorced, no children. Grew up in South Carolina, built his portfolio in silence, and turned down headlines like he turned down bad deals, with grace. They met at a philanthropic pitch event where Daphne spoke about generational equity and the importance of building institutions, not just inheritance. He didn't interrupt. He took notes, and afterward, he waited, not at the stage, but by the back exit where she slipped out to avoid the press. You don't speak like most CEOs, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment or a red flag? It's both, he smiled, which makes it honest. He didn't text every hour, didn't push past boundaries. Instead, he learned her schedule, sent flowers after board wins, sent books on legacy building and notes in the margins like, "This reminded me of your quote from last week, wealth is wasted when it lacks purpose." Daphne didn't fall. She unfolded. 3 weeks after their third dinner, not a date, just dinner, she invited him to her home. Not into her bedroom, into her nursery. Tennyson took to him instantly, reached out, no hesitation. Thatcher, ever the watchful one, stared for a long time, then reached for Caleb's watch and played with the dial. Caleb didn't flinch, didn't try to win them over with noise. He just sat on the floor and let them come to him. And Daphne watched, silently, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. That night, she stood barefoot in her kitchen while he rinsed bottles in the sink. "I never asked you to stay," she said. "You didn't have to," he replied. "I don't need an invitation to care." The air between them shifted, not with heat but with tenderness. She stepped forward. He dried his hands slowly, turned, waited. She touched his face, traced the line of his jaw, her voice low. "Do you know how long it's been since someone saw me without a title?" His reply was soft. "I see you." When he kissed her, it wasn't fast. It was reverent. It was steady. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything in return. It offered peace. Her hands gripped his shirt, unsure at first, then sure, then certain. The night unfolded without urgency, with quiet laughter, bare skin, deep breaths, pillows and hands and silence that didn't need to be filled. And when he held her afterward, he didn't whisper promises. He simply breathed with her, in sync, aligned, uncomplicated. Later, as they lay beneath the sheets, her head on his chest, she whispered, "You don't make me feel like I have to choose between being strong and being soft." He kissed her forehead. "That's because you're both." Days turned into weeks. Caleb stayed consistent, present, unbothered by the storm that used to define her life. He didn't flinch when the twins had tantrums. He didn't compete with Aiden. He simply added peace to spaces where there had only been tension. And Daphne, she bloomed again, not because of him, but because with him, she finally had room to rest. Healing doesn't come with fanfare. It comes in the quiet, in a moment between breaths, in a glance that doesn't ask for more, in hands that don't demand to be held, but remain open if you want to reach. Daphne had built kingdoms in high heels. But tonight, she stood barefoot in the doorway of her bedroom, silk robe loose, eyes unsure, and whispered 4 words she hadn't said in a long time. "Will you stay tonight?" Caleb nodded, not because he was eager, because he understood. She didn't rush. She poured wine slowly, handed him a glass, and they sat on the couch. The city lights blinked behind them. Her playlist hummed in the background, old soul music, the kind her grandmother used to clean to. He didn't try to undress her, didn't slide closer. He just asked, "What's your safe place look like?" She took a sip and said, "It's quiet. No one pulls, no one talks over me, no one touches unless I want them to." He set his glass down and waited. Later, in her room, the robe fell without ceremony. No drama, No hesitation, just choice. He stood behind her, kissed her shoulder once, then again, slower. She didn't flinch. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't being handled. She was being held. When he touched her, it wasn't choreography. It was conversation. His fingers asked. Her body answered. She moved slowly, letting herself feel everything. The warmth, the weight, the wonder of being wanted without expectation. She cried, not because she was sad, but because no one had ever waited long enough to see her like this. Not as a CEO, not as a mother, not as a trophy, but as a woman who had carried grief, labor, betrayal, and still opened her arms. Caleb kissed her cheeks, kissed her hands, kissed the scar above her hip she once hated. "You're not broken," he whispered. She didn't reply. She just pulled him closer. They moved as if they had time. No rush, no performance, just skin and breath and release, like water meeting water. And when she finally collapsed against him, chest heaving, his hand curled around the small of her back like a lock. Afterward, he traced the line of her spine with his fingertips. "You're allowed to stop carrying everything," he said gently. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Then I'll carry it with you," he promised. Not dramatic, just certain. At 2 a.m., Daphne rose to check on the twins. Caleb followed her, bare feet padding softly behind. They stood at the crib, Tennyson curled like a comma, Thatcher sucking on his thumb. "They don't know what I survived," she said. "They don't need to," Caleb replied. "They'll know what you built." She turned. He leaned forward and kissed her, slow, grounding, nothing to prove. And for the first time since the day she was left in labor, Daphne didn't feel abandoned. She felt chosen. Have you ever had to learn that intimacy could be gentle again? Drop soft ice strong if you believe healing deserves tenderness. Like, comment, and subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone love the parts of you that were never seen. It started with a knock on the door. Not urgent, not loud, just gentle. Daphne opened it wearing a long beige cardigan and cotton leggings, hair in a low braid, eyes calm. Caleb stood there with a box tucked under one arm and a paper bag in the other. "No suits tonight?" she teased. He smiled. "I brought dinner and something else." She lit candles before they sat. Not because the lights were out, but because sometimes you dim the world to hear yourself feel. The table was quiet, spoons clinking against ceramic bowls of homemade risotto he'd cooked himself. "You learned this for me?" she asked, surprised. "No," he said. "I learned it for myself, but I practiced it for you." Her smile was real. No effort required. After dinner, he opened the box. Inside was a small journal, bound in soft leather, a pen loop on the side. "What's this?" she asked. "A new kind of contract," he said. "No signatures, just intentions." She opened the first page. He had written, "I don't want to fix you. I want to honor what you've already repaired." Her hand went to her mouth. "Every week," he said, "you can write what you want. A feeling, a fear, a question. I'll respond the same way. No pressure, no deadlines," he said. "Only honesty." Later that night, they didn't make love like the first time. They chose to be close. Daphne sat on the bed in just his shirt, legs curled beneath her, while Caleb massaged lavender oil into her shoulders. He took his time, letting his hands learn her story without words. "You always ask before you touch me," she said softly. "Because consent isn't just for moments of fear," he replied. "It's for moments of care, too." When they finally came together, it was slow, intentional. Her hands gripped his waist. His mouth traced her collarbone. Their movements weren't rushed, they were deliberate. Daphne didn't need to brace herself this time. She melted. Caleb kissed her like a prayer, not for salvation, but for wholeness. Afterward, they lay face to face under the sheets, the flicker of candlelight dancing across the ceiling. "I don't want a perfect life," she whispered. "You don't need one," he replied. "You just need one that respects you." She blinked slowly. "I spent so long making sure no one could hurt me again. And now? I want to live without armor," she said. "Just skin and spine and soul." He reached for her hand beneath the sheets. "Then let's build a life where softness is sacred." In the morning, she woke to find him already feeding the twins in the kitchen. He wore her apron, one bottle in hand, a burp cloth over his shoulder. He looked up and smiled. I figured I'd give you 10 more minutes of sleep. She stepped closer, kissed his cheek. No man has ever done that for me, she said. His voice was steady. Get used to it. It didn't happen overnight. But one morning, Daphne opened her calendar, looked at the week ahead, and felt something new. Not panic, not pressure, just purpose. The rebrand for Tennyson and Thatcher Holdings launched with global attention. The logo, refreshed, minimalist, regal. The tagline, legacy starts in the living room. On launch day, Daphne stood before a packed room of reporters, founders, and families. Her sons sat in the front row, matching bow ties and juice boxes in hand. She didn't walk onto the stage with nerves. She walked like the CEO of her own breath. Today, she began, we stop measuring legacy by market cap and start measuring it by impact. Caleb watched from backstage. He didn't take photos, didn't post, didn't need credit. He simply admired her. A woman once betrayed on a marble floor, now opening a portfolio that would house dozens of mother-led startups by year's end. She's fireproof, someone whispered behind him. No, Caleb thought. She just stopped asking permission to burn. Aiden watched too, from his own office. Alone, he tried to distract himself with paperwork. A phone call, a merger review. But nothing pulled him away from the screen where Daphne, poised in a white power suit, answered every question with grace that couldn't be faked. Someone knocked. It was his assistant. Do you want to respond to the press inquiry about the T&T fund? He shook his head. No, she earned that spotlight. And for once, he meant it. Later that week, Daphne sat at a round table with venture capitalists, startup founders, and new mothers turned innovators. She wasn't there to inspire. She was there to partner. Money without mentorship is empty, she said, and power without people is just ego. The crowd applauded, but what struck most was the pause after, the moment where every woman in the room leaned forward, knowing she hadn't just survived a man. She'd become her own institution. That night, back home, Caleb prepared dinner, while the boys sprawled on the carpet with blocks and musical toys. Daphne joined them on the floor. She wasn't in heels. She wasn't on a call. She was just present. Tennyson crawled into her lap. Thatcher handed her a book. She read aloud while Caleb watched from the kitchen, apron stained with sauce, eyes soft. No performance, no perfection, just real life, worn, worked for, and won. After the twins were asleep, Daphne and Caleb sat on the patio, a glass of wine between them, the stars above. She leaned into him and whispered, I used to think love had to be loud to be real. He kissed her temple. It just has to last. She looked out over the city, the same skyline she once stared at while bleeding in a hospital bed. It hadn't changed. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She was wonder. 5 years. That's how long it had been since Daphne bled in a hallway while her name was being replaced. Now, her name was on a building, not just on a plaque, etched 60 stories high in gold letters, Tennyson and Thatcher Global HQ. Outside, a crowd gathered. Employees, partners, press, and on the rooftop, where it all began, stood Daphne Vaughn, white cape coat fluttering in the breeze. To her right, Tennyson, taller now, chin up, one hand gripping the railing like he already owned the skyline. To her left, Thatcher, quieter, analytical, drawing something in his sketch pad while the city unfolded beneath him. And beside her, Caleb, not in front, not behind, but right next to her. She stepped forward to the podium. No script, just certainty. 5 years ago, she began. I gave birth while being discarded. Murmurs rippled, but what was meant to break me became the very thing that built this. She looked down at her sons. They weren't born into luck. They were born into legacy, not because of their name, but because of the work behind it. Applause, tears in the crowd, and a soft smile from Caleb. At the reception afterward, someone asked her, Do you ever regret what happened back then? She didn't pause. She didn't soften it. I regret giving my heart to someone who didn't know what to do with it, she said. But I don't regret the lesson. The reporter blinked. And what lesson is that? She looked around, at her empire, at her boys, at the man who loved her without needing to own her, then answered, I was never meant to be someone's beginning. I was meant to be my own ending, and I wrote it myself. Back inside, Tennyson tugged at her sleeve. Mom, he whispered, can we go see our floor? She smiled. Which one? He grinned. The top. They rode the elevator as a family, all the way up. When the doors opened, they stepped out into glass, light, and a view that stretched across the city like a crown. Daphne walked to the edge, her boys on either side. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Everything that mattered was standing beside her. And everything she lost had already become fuel for what she built. The cameras were already rolling when Daphne stepped onto the soundstage. She didn't wear armor, no shoulder pads, no statement jewelry, just a soft cream blouse, high-waisted slacks, and the calm of a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist known for exposing scandal and weakness, greeted her with a handshake that lingered just a second too long. "Ms. Vaughn," he smiled, "your story's become something of a movement." Daphne sat, crossed her legs, and returned the smile. "It was never a story, it was my life." He cleared his throat. "Let's start with the obvious. Zachary Worldwide. Do you ever miss that chapter?" Her eyes didn't flicker. "I don't miss chapters I outgrew," the producer behind the camera mouthed. "Damn." He pressed again. "You could have taken the settlement quietly, retired, raised the boys out of the spotlight. Why didn't you?" She answered without flinching. "Because silence would have served him, not my sons. And definitely not other women who are told to disappear after being replaced." He nodded, scribbling in his notes. "What was the turning point for you?" She looked straight into the lens. "The moment I realized my power wasn't tied to who loved me, but to how I chose to love myself." He leaned forward now. "You were once quoted saying, 'I gave birth while being abandoned.' Do you still carry that pain?" "No," she said, and her voice didn't wobble. "I carried it. I birthed it. Then I buried it." A long pause. Then, applause from the studio staff. The interviewer glanced down again. "Final question," he said. "Do you ever regret it, walking away from the life you had?" She inhaled slowly, looked past the camera, into the air, like the skyline of her past was still rising around her. "I don't regret anything that led me here," she said. "Because what I lost that day in the hospital wasn't love, it was illusion. And what I gained was real. My sons, my peace, my truth." Then she leaned forward slightly, voice softer but louder somehow. "I gave birth on the day I was abandoned. And in that same hour, I became invincible." When the interview ended, she stood, thanked the crew, walked off the set. Not with flair, with finality. Outside, Caleb waited in the black SUV, windows down, twins in the backseat arguing over headphones. She climbed in, smiled, kissed them both on the forehead. "Good?" Caleb asked. She leaned against him. "I'm done answering questions," she said. "Now I just want to live." And as they pulled off into the city traffic, Daphne didn't look back once, because forward was hers now. My beautiful family, we've come to the end of today's story, but the journey of love never truly ends. If this touched your heart, let me feel your presence. Comment below, "I am with you, Dr. Phillips." Your words mean more than you know. Don't just watch silently, join the conversation and let your feelings be heard. If this story brought you light, please hit the like button, and if you're new, kindly subscribe so you never miss the moments we share. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement today. Until next time, stay strong in love.